Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time we have video comparison of these two devices. On my left side, iPhone 15 Pro Max, and on the right side, Galaxy S23 Ultra. Let's get started. Remember that the photo comparison is also available, but in this case we're going to limit ourselves to just looking at the video results. So let's get started. We start with the resolution section, and I think it's very clear here that the 8K is superior to the 4K. So Galaxy wins, and this means that you can even reframe your video or zoom in to extract detail, and it's still going to maintain very good quality. Unlike the iPhone, which shoots very well in 4K, but Galaxy supports the iPhones, so there's no question it's gonna be a more detailed video. Point for Samsung. Now we are looking at stabilization. In both cases still without an action mode or super stable, then it is only with the main camera. And the truth is that I see the two devices very similar. Let me put a little bit more attention, especially here that I'm going to run. Because walking I feel a little bit more stable, the Galaxy, and running, phew, very similar. Actually, there's very little difference. Very similar. I can't make up my mind so easily here. I'm going to have to watch this clip again. Because I feel like this part when I'm walking around is where Galaxy shows itself to be slightly superior. Yes, I think slightly. By very little difference, but I really like the stabilization better on Galaxy, so let's give it its point. Here I did turn on super stable mode on Galaxy and action mode on iPhone. And again, truth be told, they are super similar. I don't notice a real difference on these devices. I don't think, give a winner. They're too similar. I think basically the differences will be because of the natural movement, that maybe one hand might have moved a little bit more than the other. But the truth is they look very much the same. I'm not going to give anybody any points here. But now we're looking at zoom stabilization. And that's something that the iPhone has really excelled at. Look at the seamless stabilization that the iPhone maintains with 5x zoom. Definitely here Samsung might, let's say, in some ways be at a disadvantage because their lens has 3 or 10x zoom. But either way, we're at an intermediate zoom, and definitely iPhone maintains a stabilization that I think is spectacular. Point for the iPhone. Now let's evaluate the zoom. In this case it was not applied exactly at the same time, so there may be some variations, but you can perfectly see how each of the devices is making the jump between one and the other lens. But the truth is that they maintain a very good level of detail in both cases. Here what strikes me is simply the color, which always tends to be more accurate on iPhone. But notice that even though Samsung has a lens with a larger optical range, notice that in video recording the difference is not so abysmal. So in both cases I like the zoom. However, it is obvious that because of the longer range that the Galaxy has, we are going to give it the point. But it should also be noted that it has a smooth zoom, something that the iPhone also has, but there are other devices that have a very ugly zoom. And in both cases, they maintain good stabilization. So simply for supporting a higher level of detail, especially here when you switch to your 10x lens, I think we're going to give Samsung the point. Here's a selfie video now to see how these devices fare. Right off the bat, again, the color on the iPhone, just like in the photograph, is very accurate. So in the video, it maintains that very good color rendition. Although in this case, when zooming in on this cap, for example, the color did fail a little bit on the iPhone, but in both cases we have autofocus, so you can adjust and show things to the camera. But watch, here will be the main difference. In backlight, the iPhone wins completely. Notice how on Samsung it burns practically the whole floor, but on iPhone it maintains an excellent balance. So point to the iPhone. Now we're looking at portrait video recording. That is the mode where the background is blurred by applying a bokeh effect. Again, I'm going to say color because on the iPhone it's very accurate and very nice color. But notice how iPhone does keep objects that are at the same distance in focus while Galaxy is blurring them out of focus. So we have much better accuracy in the portrait that the iPhone gives us. The truth is that Galaxy does a very good job, but definitely in these kind of details we see that iPhone is above what Samsung offers us. So point for the iPhone. Now let's see how is the stabilization of the front camera. Watch how I'm walking around, and the truth is that both have very good stabilization. I feel like iPhone gives us a little bit more range. So that's a good thing because usually when we have good stabilization, you get a lot of sensor clipping. But here I think it's doing really well. We're walking and now we're running. And yes, I think iPhone is a little bit more stable and also a little bit wider. There's not that much difference, honestly, but I think the point I'm going to give it to the iPhone for that little bit more width that it gives us. Here it is time to highlight one of the important features of Samsung because it does allow us to record with both the front camera and the rear camera. At the same time, then for bloggers or content creators, this option comes in handy. On iPhone, that option isn't there natively, although it seems to me that you could get to buy some app for that. But here we are qualifying what the brand offers you. So in that sense, I think Samsung definitely comes out on top here. Now let's evaluate the fast camera, which is something that we don't usually evaluate a lot, but there are several parameters that we could consider. For starters, the iPhone only records in full HD this fast camera, and notice that if we pause the content at any frame, on iPhone it's going to look much more blurry, whereas on Galaxy it looks very well defined. Notice, anytime I pause, you're going to see a lot more detail on Samsung, and on iPhone it looks a lot less sharp. So Galaxy gives us this advantage of having more detail, but not only that. On iPhone we have an automatic adjustment only, while on Galaxy you can select how fast you want it to go. Although there are other devices on Android that offer you an even more amazing fast camera, but in this case, between iPhone and Galaxy, it seems that the winner of the fast camera is Galaxy. Highlighting also that both include good stabilization when taking these shots. Although I actually think the iPhone stabilizes better in this time lapse, but in all other parameters Galaxy won, so we give it the point. Next, let's listen to the microphone quality of these devices and decide who we give the point to.
Esta es una prueba con los micrófonos de estos dispositivos. En este momento estoy en exteriores, en un ambiente con un viento considerable. Entonces vamos a escuchar uno por uno los micrófonos y tú me vas a decir, y yo también te voy a decir cuál creo que es mejor. No sé qué más decir al respecto. Me parece que Samsung maneja más micrófonos. Supongo que algunos irán enfocados a cancelar el ruido, otros irán enfocados a enfocar el ruido cuando aplicas zoom para aumentar la ganancia, pero más o menos este sería el resultado con la cámara frontal. Los dispositivos están a la misma distancia y hay un viento ligero. No diría que es un entorno con demasiado viento, pero sí lo suficientemente ligero para que no sea un problema al momento de estar hablando.
In conclusion, I think the iPhone has a slightly crisper sound, but it also has more noise present. If you noticed, on the Samsung microphone you never heard the wind, while on the iPhone there was a moment or two where you got to notice that noise caused by the wind. So, of these two, I'd go with the Galaxy Audio, so I'm gonna give it a point. Here we are evaluating how well the devices record against the light, and I think it is very clear who is going to be the winner. The iPhone shows all the texture that keeps the clouds, while the Galaxy, while not completely overexposed, does not get to notice the texture that we can notice on the iPhone. Definitely the recording quality of the iPhone in this complicated environment is supreme. The blue of the sky seems to me that Samsung was more appropriate to reality. On this occasion, for the first time, the color was better on Galaxy, but in absolutely everything else, iPhone seems to me to win. So we're going to give the iPhone a point, although note that in this case, specifically in this part of the video, I feel that iPhone distorted the black color of the hoodie a bit, but I insist I'm going to give it the point for the excellent performance it has against the light. Let's see how the slow motion is. For starters, in both cases we see full HD at Deus 140 frames per second. The difference is that Samsung gives us a much wider panorama. For some reason on the iPhone we see a slightly more cropped video, so we have less perspective. So it's a difference that we might consider minimal, but it can help you quite a bit if you want to capture an area with more space. So the quality itself of the slow motion is exactly the same in resolution and in frames per second. So I think simply because of the wider shot and taking better advantage of the sensor, we're going to give the point to Samsung. Now, you also have to consider that Samsung offers a 960 frames per second mode with this super slow motion camera, and note that you can get an even more spectacular shot. So we're definitely going to give it another point for supporting this increased slowness and apart from that, maintaining the full HD resolution. Now we're evaluating the portrait recording video, or on iPhone it's called cinema mode, which is this mode where you blur the background. I definitely feel that in Samsung it's a little bit more exaggerated, and notice how in both cases this intensity is decreased or increased, but in Samsung it seems like it's still present even though I'm far away. So it doesn't look as natural. And let's now zoom in on some objects to notice these kinds of little details that would conclude a good experience. Notice how on Samsung all the branches of the tree are out of focus, while on the iPhone you can see the blur inside the gaps. So I think the experience is completely good on iPhone. Point for iPhone. Let's move on to the night selfie video. Notice how again the color on the iPhone is more accurate, but in this case we're seeing something very similar. I think slightly more detail on Galaxy I'm noticing. It looks like here it's the reverse of what was happening in the photograph. I don't know if you remember the camera comparison, but notice how on Samsung we see the shirt with a lot more noise, but that also keeps the textures a little bit more. While in iPhone we see less noise, but at the same time it could get to eliminate some textures. But of these two, I think I like the result of iPhone more, because here I think the noise is already being exaggerated in the case of Samsung, especially in these darker areas. Note how in this part, where it is practically only the illumination of the screen, I think the iPhone gets to defend better. Neither looks spectacular to me, but if I had to choose one, I'd shoot with the iPhone. Finally, we are looking at how they behave recording video at night. I think with the prime lens they look very similar. The only difference would be the color rendition, which on Samsung is slightly warmer but closer to reality, because that's how it looked in real life. It was a very warm light. So in this sense it seems to me that Samsung is winning, but let's see how it does with the other cameras, because we are going to switch to the ultra-wide camera as well. There it is. And it seems to me that in this sense, the iPhone has better light gathering, especially in the dark areas. I think there's not such an abysmal difference between one camera and the other camera. But yes, on Samsung, it seems that the ultra-wide camera and even the main camera gets to capture a little bit less light in the darker areas. Now, applying zoom, also notice that the iPhone still captures more light input. Even if we go all the way to the 10x lens, notice how the Samsung will change, but there is very little light coming in. So I think shooting at night, I would choose the iPhone as well. We give it a point. And look at nothing but interesting, because they were tied. So to break the tie, I'm going to bring up the argument that a lot of iPhone fans bring up, but I agree with them. Any of these videos that you upload to Instagram, they're going to look better if you upload them from iPhone. So let's give the iPhone the winning point. And that's it for the comparison between the video cameras of these devices. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this score, or if for you any of the points I gave didn't seem right. For the moment, we have reached the end of this video. If you liked it, you know you can point it out, and we'll see you next time.